they were in jail or prison. And that leads us to the most famous alleged member of the Unforgiven, who may not actually be a member at all. His name is Wade Wilson, and he's everything a true crime-obsessed public could ever hope for. Wilson is a murderer who carried out two brutal, premeditated, and sadistic killings within a 24-hour span, later bragging that he lured both women to their deaths through his charm. He has the same name as the comic book character Deadpool, and facial tattoos that many have compared to the Joker. Wilson blamed his crimes on accidental drug ingestion, claiming he must have taken bath salts or synthetic marijuana disguised as cocaine. But if you look at his case, there are pretty clear indications that he is a sadist. Wilson's sad story starts at a Cape Coral nightclub called Buddha, where he met Christine Melton and her best friend, Stephanie Johnson, introducing himself as JR. He seemed charming and friendly, and eventually the two women, Wilson and a man named Jason Shepard, all headed to Shepard's home, where Melton and Wilson had consensual sex. What no one knew was that Wilson had left his girlfriend at the club and stolen her car for the four to use in the process. The following morning, Wilson sprung into action, offering Melton a ride to get her alone before killing her in her home. While driving home from the scene, he was stopped for directions by a second woman named Diane Louise, convinced her to get in his car, then took her to a secluded
Yo,
area
what the?
and ran her over.
Why are you getting that
after
dude,
knocking
psycho-looking
her
dude?
unconscious. Wilson called his father for help, who played along with his son's pleas, but actually ended up calling the authorities and helping them arrest him. The crimes have generated a strange fascination, with TikTokers and news media following every small development and helping them arrest him. Wilson called his father for help after knocking her unconscious. Wilson called his father for help, who played along with his son's pleas, but actually ended up calling the authorities and helping them arrest him. The crimes have generated a strange fascination, with TikTokers and news media following every small development with great concern, and Jelly Roll's wife even recently revealing that she tried to get Wilson a Netflix show. Wilson has been convicted and sentenced to death.
Yo.
But while his case
Jelly
was
Roll
pending,
ain't Christian.
news media coast to coast wrote detailed
In a
reports about
Christian
his
family.
status as a
I
member
know I look
of
like
the
this, but
Unforgiven, claiming that police had confirmed his
he's
affiliation
not
with the
chill,
notorious
dude.
white supremacist gang. In reality, all of this appears to be based on a single sentence from one police report that was made public after Wilson was implicated in a failed escape attempt from
Trying to
Lee
get
County Jail.
Jelly Roll's wife trying to
The
get another
report
one of these Ed
says
Gein
that a
shows on
jailhouse
TV.
snitch told
Unbelievable.
authorities
Just to get a
Wilson had been
paycheck. Just to get
inmate
another
planning
paycheck.
to
Oh,
break
is
out
it
of
part of the
jail
business?
and to catch a ride to Fort Myers. And that, quote, the two are related through affiliation with the Unforgiven. Another indicator is that some of the tattoos Wilson received in jail after his arrest are symbols commonly used by white supremacist prison gangs and those who associate with them. There's some varying possibilities here. One is that the police included this line in a public report because they have other records of Wilson joining the Unforgiven in jail. But in a jail like Lee County, it is likely that all of the white inmates outside of protective custody are affiliated on some level with the Unforgiven, even if the, quote, affiliation simply means that hanging out in the same location at an exercise yard or chow hall. Furthermore, Wilson murdering two women, including a white lady with blonde hair, goes directly against what the Unforgiven professes as its core values, even though it wouldn't be the first time that a prison gang turned a blind eye to a red flag and allowed someone with a questionable past to join. In short, it's hard to draw a definitive conclusion as to whether Wilson's really a member, or simply someone who hangs around these guys in a jail setting.
Blood and dirty. You just have to
Outside
deal
of
with it, I
prison,
guess.
the Unforgiven operates somewhere between a militia and an extremist political club, with members who stockpile weapons, spread propaganda, and sell merchandise as both a form of income and recruitment. In 2019, their president on the outside, was a man named Darren Terranova. But a lot of people within the Unforgiven were not happy with his leadership. They viewed Terranova as being too soft and too tolerant of members who strayed from the Unforgiven's code of conduct. And some believed the organization was suffering as a whole. Their solution was to replace Terranova with this guy, Maverick Marr, also known as
That's a good name.
He took over the Unforgiven with a directive to weed out members in bad standing and clean house. Under Marr's tenure, Florida was divided into sectors, allowing lieutenants to micromanage their areas more effectively. And he directed members to use the messaging app Marco Polo to send video communications to one another, with the important caveat that they not say anything they wouldn't say to a cop. Unfortunately for the Unforgiven, this caveat was thrown to the wayside by many, and the ATF was able to get its hands on many of these Marco Polo videos, with predictable results. The man seen here is Joshua Fisher, aka Hammer. He was something of a unicorn in the Unforgiven, due to his complete lack of a criminal record in the late 2010s. This made him a particularly valuable member, and prosecutors say this group, quote, sought to have him as a political mouthpiece and invested in his image as a future candidate for public office, including possibly the mayor of Brooksville, Florida. Of course, there was a downside to being a man with a clean record amongst hardened convicts. Many in the Unforgiven believed Fisher had a chip on his shoulder due to him never having gone to prison and would jump at the first chance to be violent. During a Black Lives Matter rally in Hernando County, Fisher allegedly told Unforgiven members to, quote, arm up, and chased protesters with a machete through the streets.
Deputies say he pulled out a machete after trying to start a fight.
In another instance, he was part of a wrecking crew that entered an Unforgiven member's home, sliced his neck for using drugs, smashed his face with the butt of a shotgun, and left after making a wisecrack that the attack was, quote, from your neighborhood white supremacists. Marr began to keep a, quote, book of life, essentially a roster that made it easier to keep track of members in good and bad standing and how to handle them. For many within the Unforgiven, this was the beginning of the end of their membership. Marr formed hit squads to eliminate weak blood, but they showed some compassion. Rather than murdering bad members, they would simply beat them to a pulp, cover their tattoos, and sometimes replace the Unforgiven symbol with the word void and make their excommunication official. Examples of this included a man named Coke Lawson, who was accused of sexually harassing an Unforgiven prospect's wife. He was assaulted, urinated on, and his tattoos were marked out and replaced with scrawlings that made it clear he was no longer a part of the Unforgiven. Unlike many who had received the same fate, though, Lawson's excommunication allegedly came on Marr's orders alone, rather than through the typical protocol, which was to put an excommunication to a vote. Such a vote occurred with another man named Troy Bailey, who was in bad standing for giving his girlfriend an Unforgiven patch when she'd been labeled a police informant. She also had a baby with a black man. Didn't exactly make Bailey too popular within the Unforgiven. But several ex-members who turned snitch would later tell the ATF that the group to a police informant for giving his girlfriend with another man named Troy Bailey, who was in bad standing for giving occurred an excommunication to a vote. Such a vote occurred with another man named Troy Bailey, who was in bad standing for giving his girlfriend an Unforgiven patch when she'd been labeled a police informant. She also had a baby with a black man. Didn't exactly make Bailey too popular within the Unforgiven. But several ex-members who turned snitch would later tell the ATF that the group planned to not just excommunicate Bailey, but there were some who wanted to kill him. But the ATF dropped the hammer on this group before anything happened to Bailey, charging 15 people to include Marr, Joshua, Hammer Fisher, Brandon Scumbag Welch, and other members with nicknames like Stretch, Shrek, and Pretty Boy. As Brandon Welch wrote in the previously mentioned love letter, only 4 of those charged took their case to trial. 8 turned into cooperators, and the remainder accepted guilty pleas and prison sentences that came with it. Those 4 included Maverick Marr, who took the stand in his own defense after listening to several former members testify against him. Marr painted a very different picture of the Unforgiven from what media, the ATF, and federal prosecutors had described. He said the organization had 2,500 members of varying religious, political, and even ethnic backgrounds, including members who were mixed race and those who openly rejected a neo-Nazi philosophy, yet were still accepted by the group. Quote, "Do we have white supremacists? Absolutely. Do we have racists? Absolutely. Do we have people that are very much not either of those things? Yes, absolutely factual." Another thing Marr claimed
Dude, why
was
I
that part of his
swear, why
takeover
does
of the
orange juice
Unforgiven
always taste like
included a push to
crap?
make the
Did I
group,
not shake it?
quote,
Is that what?
100% legal, including an absolute prohibition on robberies, extortion, and drug sales. As for the assault on Coke Lawson, Marr
Happening.
claimed it was entirely Joshua Fisher. Another thing Marr claimed was that part of his takeover of the Unforgiven included a push to make the group, quote, 100% legal, including an absolute prohibition on robberies, extortion, and drug sales. As for the assault on Coke Lawson, Marr claimed it was entirely Joshua Fisher's fault, explaining that Fisher was, quote, a very problematic character. Whether the jury believed Marr's testimony is unclear, but they did find him and his 3 co-defendants liable for the various assaults, and a judge sentenced them to lengthy federal prison terms. As
Hello?
for Tyndall Williams, the man we started this episode with, he came up in a violent crime investigation in 2011, just 8 years after being sentenced to life. This time, authorities called him a leader of the Unforgiven in Tomoka Correctional Institution, who had organized and helped carry out an attack against a prison snitch. The victim was targeted for telling police about Unforgiven contraband rings in the facility, and his identity was the biggest irony of them all. He was Esteban Quintanal, a man who had murdered Hialeah police officer Pedro Antonio Canas in 1992 during a domestic violence call. Tyndall Williams and the other 4 men waited for Quintanal to shower during mealtime. Then, 3 of them pounced on him while the other 2 kept watch. He was rushed to an off-site hospital and barely survived the stabbing. The recent Unforgiven prosecution, while technically a success, has done little to curb the gang's activity. It still maintains a strong presence throughout the state of Florida, with the potential to go even further. As the gang's profile is raised by its connection to Wade Wilson, and as many more members end up in federal prison through the DOJ's ongoing efforts to go after the gang, it is likely that the Unforgiven will continue to spread.
Y'all have remember anything about this, but I thought this was the Sunshine State. It's supposed to be Florida. What the fuck is this? J1, what that is? That ice. Doing that's what all these people be out here smoking this ice.
What the frick, dude? People are trippy. Ugh, man, especially out in the South, man. I had no idea how weird you guys got down here. Terror of the Brotherhood, Oklahoma's most feared gang? What are these pussies up to?
Guess I need your help. I got something tied up I need gone. Those words were texted to an Oklahoma woman named Jennifer Moore Porgo from her friend, Matthew Onsimo Armstrong. Jennifer drove up to Armstrong's remote
Yo, you
property
ladies
in
that be
Seminole
fucking with
County,
these
Oklahoma,
guys are
perhaps
just as
assuming
big
that
as
she
the
was
problem.
needed for a quick errand.
Oh, look how ugly she is,
But
too.
when she arrived at the
What
modest
the
home
fuck?
surrounded by the woods on Road 363,
I mean, I'm no
Jennifer
prize,
was
but
greeted by the sound of a woman's blood-curdling scream in the distance. The cries were coming from Nicole Marlene Owl, a woman who had spent the better part of the past day tied to a tree. Matthew Armstrong and his roommate, Nicholas Faulkner, were responsible. 2 days earlier, Armstrong had confronted Nicole with allegations that she had stolen $200, marijuana, and about 3.5 grams of meth, and hidden the stash somewhere in the woods. When she denied it, Armstrong tied her down with extension cords and left to retrieve his father's SKS rifle from a property nearby. But his rage was about much more than just the missing items. For you see, Armstrong was a part of something bigger, a prison gang called the Indian Brotherhood, widely considered to be the most dangerous and violent gang within Oklahoma prisons. Like most prison gangs, the Indian Brotherhood's lifeblood is contraband smuggling, and Armstrong was one of the many members on the
Indian
outside
Brotherhood?
tasked with keeping the supply chain moving. His
It's the
crucial
most
role
feared
in the
gang in
gang
Oklahoma.
involved stockpiling drugs, tobacco, cell phones for others to smuggle into Oklahoma prison yards controlled by the Brotherhood, and to protect the gang's property from rivals and thieves. Nicole Owl had now placed herself at odds with not just Armstrong, but a vast criminal enterprise with a chilling history of murder and mayhem. Now her life hung in the balance. If this scene sounds petrifying to you, you'll soon learn that it is simply one of a string of similar crimes that have earned the Brotherhood its reputation as a gang perfectly willing to kill not just rivals, but innocent women and unborn children who simply happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. We'll be giving you an insider's view of the Indian Brotherhood as told by those who witnessed its violent legacy firsthand. It's a story told through the lens of a gang that thrives in some of the most debaucherous conditions known to man, connecting the world of sleazy meth markets on the Great Plains with the supposedly glamorous lifestyle found in high-end Nevada brothels. This is the Killer Chronicles. Throughout the United States, there is no other place that has become more synonymous with Native American history and subjugation than Oklahoma. Formerly known as simply Indian Territory, it was the destination of the Trail of Tears, ground zero for the near extinction of millions of bison during the 19th century, and home to dozens of tribes and tribal nations, many of which were forced there through the Indian Removal Act of 1830. To this day, Native tribes are prevalent in Oklahoma, much more so than most other places, which has created unique challenges regarding jurisdictional issues and sovereignty. It should be no surprise, then, that Oklahoma is also home to one of the largest and most powerful Native prison gangs, which has spread not just into the Oklahoma Department of Corrections, but also nationwide, as a groundbreaking Supreme Court case drastically changed how crimes in Native lands can be prosecuted. The Indian Brotherhood uses the initials IBH, or the corresponding numbers 928, which are commonly tattooed on members' bodies, often with feather-style letters. They sport tattoos of traditional indigenous face markings and often refer to themselves or one another as warriors, as well as brothers. The gang is a constant target of law enforcement, but surprisingly few details about its inner workings have been made public. One declassified DEA document from 2017 describes it as an extremely compartmentalized gang, with at least 329 known members, divided into 29 subgroups, known as tribes. Its leadership consists of a 5-person high council that votes on major issues, and each prison is controlled by a war chief. Like most prison gangs, it is built around the concept of self-protection while incarcerated. The IBH is believed to have been founded in the 1990s and has been expanding ever since. The 29 tribes listed by DEA investigators have names that reference well-known Native civil rights activists or important events in Native American history, with examples to include the Crazy Snake Tribe, a reference to the last Indian uprising of 1909, the Dog Soldiers, referencing Cheyenne military societies, and the Skinwalker Tribe, a callback to a supernatural being in Navajo folklore.
Dang,
Despite
I
these
miss all the cool
empowering and
shit.
culturally significant titles, the full Native prison gangs, which has spread not just into the Oklahoma Department of Corrections, but
This
also
sucks.
nationwide, as a groundbreaking Supreme Court case drastically changed how crimes in native
Only back
lands
like this,
can
not
be
my face.
prosecuted. The Indian Brotherhood uses the initials IBH, or the corresponding numbers 928, which are commonly tattooed on members' bodies, often with feather-style letters. They sport tattoos of traditional indigenous face markings and often refer to themselves or one another as warriors as well as brothers. The gang is a constant target of law enforcement, but surprisingly few details about its inner workings have been made public. One declassified DEA document from 2017 describes it as an extremely compartmentalized gang, with at least 329 known members, divided into 29 subgroups, known as tribes. Its leadership consists of a 5-person high council that votes on major issues, and each prison is controlled by a war chief. Like most prison gangs, it is built around the concept of self-protection while incarcerated. The IBH is believed to have been founded in the 1990s and has been expanding ever since. The 29 tribes listed by DEA investigators have names that reference well-known Native civil rights activists or important events in Native American history, with examples to include the Crazy Snake Tribe, a reference to the last Indian uprising of 1909, the Dog Soldiers, referencing Cheyenne military societies, and the Skinwalker Tribe, a callback to a supernatural being in Navajo folklore. Despite these empowering and culturally significant titles, the main functions of the IBH seem centered on drug sales, contraband smuggling, and shocking violence that frequently targets women. In 2016, an alleged member of the IBH High Council was implicated in a massive meth trafficking ring, organized by another member named Cody McClendon. Federal prosecutors said both men would use contraband cell phones to run a statewide drug and smuggling ring behind bars, with couriers making deals for as much as $26,750 at a time. According to the indictment, the DEA got wind of all of this when a courier named Amber Claflin was arrested in West Siloam Springs, Oklahoma, for having meth and attempting to spend a counterfeit $100 bill, and agreed to introduce Cody McClendon to an undercover drug bureau agent, leading to a massive wiretap of Cody and other IBH associates' phones. This case was a fairly open and shut affair, and didn't stray beyond what one expects from your typical prison gang. But as we'll see, many IBH-related prosecutions have been much, much darker. Damian Martin's last week on Earth started with a stroke of good luck. He won big at a local casino in Oklahoma, to the tune of several $1,000s. So when he turned up missing from McIntosh County on September 21st, 2017, many people assumed it was foul play by someone who wished to part Martin from his newfound cash. These fears were thrown into overdrive when an Eufaula man noticed a foul odor from a metal shed in his backyard and called police. And the officers came to discover Martin's decomposing body in a box marked Christmas tree. The man who reported this grisly discovery had a stepson named William Clayton Brown, a Choctaw Nation member, who was also a part of the Indian Brotherhood, and who would turn out was one of the last men to see Martin alive. When police began to query Brown's friends and family, a bizarre and twisted story emerged. It turned out that Brown and Martin were friends, and that they'd decided it would be a nice idea to spend some of Martin's newfound money on crank and go on a multi-day bender, while hanging out with Brown's sister, Lacey Watson, who was casually dating Martin. At one point, Watson decided to take a bath while Brown and Martin engaged in an informal freestyle rap battle. While she was nude in the tub, the two men burst in. Lacey, apparently not wanting her brother to stare at her while she took a bath, told Brown to leave, but let Martin stay. So Brown got a knife, kicked in the door, and stabbed Martin in the brain. He would later claim he believed that Martin was going to attack his sister, an allegation that seemed to have no basis whatsoever. Brown's lawyers decided to blame not Brown or Martin, but the meth, stating that Meth equals death. And quoting a Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson song that explains how, with drugs,
The low is always lower than the high.
one of the oddest details of his trial was Brown apparently confessing to a jail deputy named Timothy Mark Goodwin, who was the uncle of Brown's girlfriend, and who later became chief of police of Eufaula. At trial, Brown's lawyers described him as deeply remorseful. What they didn't say was that by then, he'd committed several more stabbings in jail, attacked deputies, and killed another person. The victim, Mark Lawhead, was inextricably placed in a cell with Brown despite being a convicted rapist and a member of the Savage Boys gang, which rivals the IBH.
Was that actually him?
After strangling Lawhead
the hell?
in brutal fashion with Brown, more of
This
Eufaula.
real?
At trial, Brown's lawyers described him as deeply remorseful. What they didn't say was that by then, he'd committed several more stabbings in jail, attacked deputies, and killed another person. The victim, Mark Lawhead, was inextricably placed in a cell with Brown despite being a convicted rapist and a member of the Savage Boys gang, which rivals the IBH. After strangling Lawhead in brutal fashion by stuffing a bag down his throat, Brown mailed out a letter to his girlfriend stating, "I smoked a Savage Boy last night. On God, I did." He also stabbed a fellow IBH member who openly expressed surprise, telling police that he and Brown were both in good standing with the gang, and there was no apparent reason for the attack. Brown was later convicted of both murders. It was Valentine's Day 2020, and Tommy Gouge had every reason in the world to be happy. He had been released from jail for a domestic violence arrest just a few days earlier, and now he was returning home to his loving wife, Stephanie, and his young
The hell's
child,
wrong with these
two
guys?
stepchildren. But on this day, Gouge called police to casually explain that he'd stabbed and beaten his wife to death and would meet the cops out front with the kids in the yard. Police in Clearview, Oklahoma, drove up to Gouge's home and took him into custody, where he explained the murder had to do with his wife sending ass pics to another man. But what seemed to be a straightforward case of domestic violence took a turn into gang politics, as Tommy Gouge then proceeded to write and sign a confession letter bringing IBH business into the killing. He wrote, quote, "She was trying to set me up to get killed by Indian Brotherhood because I decided to get out and move on the right path. I found her texting an IBH member saying I had a green light to be killed." Gouge later pleaded guilty to avoid a trial. That brings us to the tragic life of Matthew Onsimo Armstrong. Born into the Seminole Nation, Armstrong's childhood was marred by pediatric seizures, abandonment, and abuse at the hands of his grandfather, where he'd been beaten or locked in a closet as a form of punishment. As a young man, he turned to his father for guidance, and that's how he was introduced to the Indian Brotherhood. By 2017, he was a full-fledged member, entrusted with a crucial role in a prison contraband smuggling ring, and working with a prospect named Nicholas Faulkner, aka Pony Boy. The two were staying together in Armstrong's remote property when Faulkner met Nicole Owl at a party in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and agreed to let her stay with them after learning she'd been kicked out of her prior residence. Just a few days into her stay, Nicole was seen jumping out of Armstrong's window with a tote bag and running into the woods. When Armstrong realized his drugs and cash were missing, and naturally connecting the two dots, Nicole denied stealing the items, but said it was possible she'd lost them in the woods. That's when they forced her out into the forest and tied her to a tree, which Faulkner would later insist was not meant to torment her, but rather explained it was a native tradition to tie people to trees when they needed to get sober. By the end of Nicole's horrifying ordeal, Armstrong had made up his mind. He drove to his father Jimmy's home, retrieved the SKS rifle, and in the presence of witnesses, shot Nicole once in the chest and once in the head. Then he turned to Faulkner and coldly stated, "No more girls at the house. The group left Nicole's body tied to a tree for another day before burying her in a shallow grave underneath 160 pounds of concrete they purchased at a local store. Jennifer Morpurgo was a participant in all of this, but not exactly a willing one. Understandably afraid for her life after what she'd seen. Once she was away from the two men, she took the first chance she got to call the police. Both men were arrested, and they would go on to confess. But when authorities researched Matthew Onsimo Armstrong, they realized he participated in a murder before. In 2015, two people in their 20s, named Joseph Bounds and Summer Goki, were shot and killed in a vehicle behind a Walmart in Seminole County, Oklahoma. The perpetrator was later found, arrested, and convicted in what police said was a dispute over meth and a dispute over another criminal plot. But before police arrested a suspect, the Indian Brotherhood tried to solve Bounds' murder on their own and assigned Armstrong along with a man named John Knight, aka Kuzo, to do some detective work. They were told to go to the home of a man named Scotty Candler and question him about his possible involvement in the murders. Things went awry quickly. Both Matthew and Kuzo showed up to Candler's with guns, with Matthew firing shots at Candler's guard dogs, while Knight allegedly went into the home. Candler ended up dead in his bed, shot in the head. Afterwards, they disposed of their weapons and got a ride out of there from Armstrong's dad. The three got away with the murder for 2 years. But while all of this IBH violence certainly shocked the conscience of Oklahomans, there was one crime in particular that changed the way people look at the Indian Brotherhood. It was a mini massacre of 2009 that came to be known as the Cat House Murders, and created shockwaves that are still being felt to this day. Casey Barrientos needed a bodyguard, and there were plenty of reasons why. The year was 2009, and Casey was making a name for himself as a local supplier of marijuana, meth, and cocaine in the Oklahoma City area. But he was also affiliated with major figures in the local sex trade, where the lines between stripping and prostitution can get a little blurry. Casey was known to some by the nickname Diablo, a menacing-sounding title that somewhat contradicted his reputation as a charming socialite who liked to sell drugs and throw parties out of the same home. Casey's trap house at 1511 Southwest 56th Street was, quote, a place where men carried guns, women often walked around naked, marijuana bricks were stacked in the kitchen, and $100,000 in cash was usually on a coffee table. Casey flaunted his illicit wealth, not just by displaying cash, but also wearing a distinctive custom chain with a skull as the centerpiece. With all of this money and jewelry, Casey Barrientos was a target. And that's where a cage fighter known as Hooligan came in. Before David Tyner was known as Hooligan, he earned the title of Stan. It stood for shit that ain't nothing. Because, since he was a young adult, Tyner would always look for ways to one-up whatever the last guy had just talked about. It got to the point where people came to expect a line of BS out of him, and hardly anything he said was taken literally. In high school, at his hometown of Locust Grove, Oklahoma, Tyner hadn't excelled at much, but he thrived on wrestling mats, making a name for himself in national competitions and earning a path to college through competitive sport. But a poor academic performance got him booted from the University of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and a stint at a college in Muskogee, Oklahoma hadn't gone much better. With his future in question, Tyner turned toward a life that offered him the possibility to back up his outlandish stories of adventure and accomplishment with real action. He signed up for the Marines, just as the United States was prepping for what would become the decades-long wars in the Middle East. Among his fellow Marines in Iraq, Tyner would make his homicidal thoughts known. He once stuck an M16 into his own mouth in front of them, and he would also describe frequent nightmares of what he referred to as black thoughts, whereby an imaginary friend would speak to him with instructions to kill people. Most of all, though, He talked about how cool it would be to one day become a hitman for the mob. Like his college career, his stint in the military hit a wall. So Tyner once again turned to his first love. He became an MMA cage fighter. And for the first time in a long time, he found success. He posted a 6-1 record, with all 6 victories coming in the first round. But he also made a life-changing contact with another fighter people knew as Phil DZ. His real name was Denny Phillips. You might say he was in the recruiting business. Denny Phillips was a career criminal. There was no other way to put it. He was into mixed martial arts, and this was far from the only form of fighting he'd experienced during his rough life. He'd fought in the streets, fought the police, and spent 10 years fighting others in prison while serving a sentence for assault, defrauding a pawn store. He'd even once been arrested for trying to make a mobile meth lab in the trunk of his own car. While incarcerated, he joined the Indian Brotherhood, rising the ranks to become war chief. After being released from prison, he was expected to find suitable prospects to join the gang, as well as to assist with raking in cash through drug sales. In David Hooligan Tyner, Denny found a potential brother. Both men were Cherokee. They were both from Oklahoma, and Tyner's desire to fit in somewhere seemed to coincide well with the Indian Brotherhood structure. Soon, Tyner was at Denny's beck and call. One of his first jobs was to protect Casey Diablo Barrientos from any potential harm. The reason for this was simple. Barrientos and Denny weren't just friends, they were partners in the drug business. Tyner and Casey began spending a lot of time together, to the point where Tyner practically lived at the Southwest 56th Street home. Then, the relationship between Casey and Denny started to devolve. Brooke Phillips, who had no relation to Denny, was raised by her 2 aunts, as her mother would lose custody and go on to make headlines for allegedly attempting to cook meth in a Walmart bathroom. By 17, Brooke was a single mom with big dreams of acquiring fame and fortune, but constantly battling her own worst impulses. After turning 18, with her goal of becoming a nurse apparently dashed, Brooke found a job at a strip club called Bosco's. The pay was good, with Brooke being able to make as much as $1,000 on a good night. By now, she was into party drugs and caught in a lifestyle that required her to pretend to enjoy the company of men who were oftentimes paying her because they couldn't attract women without a pocket full of cash. One media report recounted this. Brooke, known as Hayden Brooks in the business, had everyone's attention when on the phallic stripper's pole, which she would envelop like a snake. "I worked at Night Trips and I'm cute," she said, and got the job. 2 years prior, her mother had been on the same stage, dancing to feed her methamphetamine addiction. During this time of her life, Brooke made 2 contacts that would change everything for her. One was a man named Jose Fierro, a local guy who owned a business that arranged bachelor parties. The second was with a woman named Shelley Duchelle, who shared Brooks's life vision and told Brooke about a rare opportunity on the other side of the country. And that's how, by age 21, Brooke came to work at a little building near Carson City, Nevada, called the Moonlight Bunny Ranch. In a country where prostitution is almost universally outlawed, the Moonlight Bunny Ranch is one of America's few exceptions, where paying clients can fornicate with the person of their choice in a completely above-board and legal fashion. The ranch was owned by a man named Dennis Hoff, who, in the world of legalized prostitution, is what Hugh Hefner was to topless magazines. Or to put it more bluntly, the P.T. Barnum of pimps. Hoff had been a connoisseur of brothels before he bought the ranch and became its owner. But he wasn't exactly shy about his habit of dating much younger women who worked there. But Hoff had instincts that went beyond the simple mantra of sex sells, and sought to exploit the curiosity of those who aren't directly a part of that world at all. Hoff was able to successfully pitch an HBO show called Cat House, which not only delved into the lives of sex workers at the ranch, but which also included racy footage that bordered on outright pornography. Brooke found herself a brief part in that show, including a notable scene where she masturbated on camera as other women looked on. All the while she was working at the ranch as a legal sex worker. It was hardly putting out for peanuts. The Moonlight Ranch might not have been a place to earn a wholesome reputation, but it was a good place to rake in cash. And Brooke was proving to be a major draw. She earned $20,000 for a single overnight party, and even went on the Tyra Banks show to promote Cat House. Then, at age 22, Brooke stepped away from it all. She returned to Oklahoma with a new goal in mind. She wanted to be a mother again. Brooke and Hoff dated for a few months, and he took an interest in her desire for motherhood. One news report from Oklahoma said he, quote, arranged for her to get pregnant. And that's where Jose Fierro re-entered Brooks's life. By now, Fierro had started his own entertainment business called Spanish Fly, but he had plenty of contacts in the drug world too. Jose was successful. He'd been able to purchase a home in Oklahoma City. It was at 1511 Southwest 56th Street, where his lifelong friend, Casey Diablo Barrientos, came to live. This brings us to 2009. Brooke Phillips was pregnant and still living in Oklahoma. Casey Barrientos was still in the drug game, but without his former bodyguard David Tyner, who had left the area on the orders of Denny Phillips. Denny was living in Salina, a decent drive away from Oklahoma City. But his friendship with Casey was a thing of the past. They'd argued about money, not just in the marijuana trade, but also over car and motorcycle purchases that had come into dispute. Now, Denny had had it with Casey's perceived disrespect. He made up his mind. He was moving into the drug business in Oklahoma City, and step one was to take Casey Barrientos completely out of the picture. Denny Phillips and David Tyner made one more fateful decision. They hatched a plan to rob and kill Casey, and didn't seem to mind discussing this plan in front of their girlfriends. In preparation for this murder, David Tyner was given permission to receive his first IBH prospect tattoo. In at least one of these conversations, Denny made it clear, no eyewitnesses were to be left behind, no matter what it took. David Tyner assembled his crew, recruiting two men named Jonathan Cochran and Russell Lee Hogshooter to assist. On November 8th, 2009, everything came to a head. Tyner got into a white Pontiac Grand Prix, picked up Cochran and Hogshooter in a town near Tulsa. Altogether, they had a .40 caliber